Topic 2 is about externality. Before we talk about externality, we will first discuss the Pareto efficiency and market failures. And there are also 3 versions of handouts for you to print. I recommend you to print the first version. What is Pareto efficiency? Let's take a look at the definition. The definition says that an outcome is said to be Pareto efficient if there does not exist another outcome in which someone is made better off and no one is made worse off. If you feel confused, you can understand it like if there is no room for improvement in the current situation, then the current situation is called Pareto efficient. And what is the room for improvements? It is to make someone better off without making anyone worse off. And this is called room improvements. Okay, let's see this sentence compared with situation A. If someone in situation B is better off and no one in situation B is worse off, then the situation A is or is not Pareto efficient. It isn't, because it has room for improvements. It means it's not the best now. So it's not Pareto efficient at present. And the change from situation A to situation B is called Pareto improvements. For example, there are Alice and Bob. Alice has 3 apples and Bob has 3 oranges. Both Alice and Bob want more varieties of food, so they discuss and exchange 1 apple and 1 orange. And after the exchange, both Alice and Bob will be happier, which means they were both better off. Then we called the process from situation A to situation B is Pareto improvements. But we should note that Pareto efficiency is a weak welfare concept. It means we can judge the Pareto inefficiency as a bad outcome, but we cannot say that Pareto efficiency is a good outcome. There is an example. One single person, X, owns all the wealth in the society, and other one owns 0 of the wealth. Then if we want to make some improvements and give some X wealth to Y, no matter what we do, the X will be worse off, right? So in this current situation, we have no way to make some changes to make the situation better. Then the current situation X owns all the things is a Pareto efficient situation. So we said that Pareto efficiency is a weak welfare concept. We cannot judge it as a proper welfare distribution situation. Okay, so let's take a look at what the surplus is. Surplus refers to the benefits that individuals or business receive when they are able to engage in a transaction at a price that is better than their minimum acceptable price. If I were a consumer, I'm willing to pay 100 Hong Kong dollars, but the market price is just 80 Hong Kong dollars. Then my surplus is 20 Hong Kong dollars. If I were the producer, I'm willing to get 50 Hong Kong dollars, but the market price is actually very high. It's 80 Hong Kong dollars. Then my surplus is 30 Hong Kong dollars. Then if I want to calculate the total surplus, I just need to add them up. So the total surplus is 50. The market failure. When does the market failure occur? It occurs when the market power exists, and it also occurs when the market doesn't exist. The market power is what we illustrate with an example before, do you remember, which is monopoly in topic 1. Monopoly is a very typical case in market failure. It means there is just the one firm in the market. For example, in clothing markets of the society, there are just one clothing firms in the society. Then everyone has to buy the clothes from this company. Then this company can set any price. Monopoly exploits its market power by setting a high price and producing less output to control the whole market. This is market power. And monopoly outcome is inefficient. And another situation is the market doesn't exist. When does the market doesn't exist? The first one is asymmetric information. We talked about it last course, and the other one is externalities. We will talk about it later. And the other one is public goods, because no one can set the price for the public goods. So the market goods doesn't have price, doesn't have markets. Let's look at the definition of externality. When the activity of one entity directly affects the welfare of another in a way that is not reflected in the market price, that effect is called externality. From this definition, we can see there are two important ingredients. The first one is the existence of an externality depends on the presence or absence of markets. The second one is depends on the definition of entities. What does it mean to depend on the definition of entity? For example, there is a factory A whose pollutes affects the factory B. But if the factory A directly acquires factory B and they merge into a factory C, does this externality still exist? No, because two entities have become one entity. So as we just said, externality means that one entity affects another. We need two entities at least. So in this case, when company A acquires company B, their externality is internalized and there is no externality anymore. And externalities are divided into positive externality and negative externality. Positive externality are beneficial to others, such as education, and negative externalities are harmful to others, such as the secondhand smoking and pollution, which are very harmful to the health of others. The externality also can be divided into the consumption externality and the production externality. For example, a factory polluting the environment is a production externality, and secondhand smoking is an example of consumption externality because it's the behavior between the consumers. We need to know the externality are reciprocal. For example, the factory A polluting every day and affects some citizens, but if the citizens move to another city, then the externality will not affect them. So this is the reason why we said the externality are reciprocal. And before we learn how to calculate some numbers about externalities, we need to know these four lines: the marginal social cost, the marginal private cost, the marginal social benefit, and the marginal private benefits. And the marginal social cost is the total cost to the society of producing an additional unit of a good or service, including both private cost and external cost. And the marginal private cost is not include the external cost. It's just consider itself, but not the whole society. And these two lines are supply curve because it's cost. Cost is for firms, and firms is for the supply curve. The marginal social benefit is the total benefit to the society for consuming an additional unit of a good or service, including both private benefits and external benefits. And the marginal private benefits means we don't need to consider the whole society benefits, we just need to think ourselves. And this two curve is about benefits. And benefits, we need to know benefits is not profits. Profit is for firms, and benefits is for consumers. So the benefit is for this demand curve. So these two are demand curve. These two are supply curve. Then we will learn how to calculate the surplus in the graph. It doesn't matter if you have never studied the economics before. I will just tell you directly that there is a very classic coordinate system in economics. The vertical axis, where we said the y-axis is price, and the horizontal axis, where we said x-axis is the quantity. And there is a supply curve in the graph. Supply curve is for the firms. For the producers, where we said the suppliers. And why the supply curve is upward sloping? Because if I were a factory, I see the price goes up. Then I want to expand my production, right? So the quantity will increase too. And if I were a consumer, the demand curve is for consumer. If I were a consumer, I see the price goes up. Then I will decrease my consumption. The demand curve, the quantity will decrease. So the demand curve is downward sloping, the supply curve is upward sloping. And the intersection of supply curve and demand curve, it is a equilibrium point. And this is the market equilibrium price. This is the market equilibrium quantity. Let's assume there is a phone market in Hong Kong, and the market price for the phone is 8,000 Hong Kong dollars. And suppose there are countless consumers on this demand curve. For example, at this point, the expected price for this consumer is 9,000 Hong Kong dollars. But the actual price in the market is just 8,000 Hong Kong dollars, right? Then the consumer surplus is the distance of this segment is 1,000 Hong Kong dollars. And suppose there is another consumer, the consumer's expected price is 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. Then this consumer surplus is 2,000 Hong Kong dollars. So suppose there are countless consumers on this line. We can add up all these segments, and then we can use the knowledge of calculus. But I know that some of you have never learned the calculus yet. But using the knowledge of calculus, I will just tell you directly that after adding up these line segments is actually the area of this triangle. So why we said that the consumer surplus is the area of the red triangle? That's the reason. So similarly, the producer surplus, assume there are countless producers in this line. And for example, in this point, there is a producer. He wants to sell his phone at 6,000 Hong Kong dollars. But when he walked into the market, he saw the price is 8,000 Hong Kong dollars. So he felt that he earned 2,000 Hong Kong dollars. This line segment is his producer surplus. So imagine there are countless producers in this line. We add all the producer surplus together. The final outcome is the area of this blue triangle. So this is the producer surplus. And some students may ask why we don't need to consider the right-hand side, the supplier, and this consumer. Why we don't need to consider it? Because when the Q is larger than Q1, there is no market. Both of the consumer and the supplier think the transaction is not worthwhile. So the right-hand side, there are no transactions, there are no markets, so we don't need to consider it. And what if the equilibrium points move here? Let's say the new equilibrium points move here. The consumer surplus is this triangle, this small triangle, and the producer surplus is this blue trapezoid. And what if the equilibrium points move here? The consumer surplus is this big triangle, and the producer surplus is this triangle minus this triangle. Why we need to minus this triangle? Because when the price is larger than the P star, the producer in this line think the transaction is not worthwhile. So the producer surplus in this point are negative. So we need to minus this triangle. And what if the equilibrium point move here? Similarly, the consumer surplus is this triangle minus this triangle, right? And the producer surplus is this big triangle. Okay, after knowing this, we can enter the next part, the 4 types of externalities. Negative production externality, negative consumption externality, positive production externality, positive consumption externality. So the first one is negative production externality. The x-axis is the quantity, the y-axis is the price, and this is the supply curve, this is the demand curve. And before we think about the externality, the supply curve is MPC or MSC. And before we think about externality, the demand curve is MPB or MSB. But after thinking about the externality, we need to determine which curve will increase or decrease. So it is a production externality, so it's for the producer or for the supplier. So it must impact the supply curve. So this curve will change. So we need to determine whether it's going upwards or downwards. Because it is a negative externality, so there must be some negative impacts. We call it the damage. And we can draw a curve called marginal damage. Is from this original point upward sloping, MD curve. Marginal damage is the extra harm caused by producing one more units of something. So after knowing the MD curve and MPC curve, we can calculate the MSC curve is equal to MPC plus MD. Because the MSC is considering the whole society. So we need to consider the pollution, we need to consider some other damage. So MSC is equal to MPC plus MD. So this is the reason why the MSC is like this. So why does the damage per unit increase as the Q increase? For example, there is a factory polluting every day, and the PM 2.5 increase from 0 to 100, and later the PM 2.5 increase from 100 to 200. In these two processes, it seems that the additional pollution is the same, and obviously the later one is more harmful to our body. So this is the reason why the MD curve is upward sloping. Okay, after knowing this, we can know the old equilibrium point is E1 and the new equilibrium point is E star. E1 is the situation where there are no externality, and E star is the situation where there are externality. And E star correspond to Q star and P star, and U1 correspond to P1 and Q1. Okay, and we add some letters. This is A, this is B, D, F, G, H. Okay, so we can calculate the consumer surplus and producer surplus at Q star level first. At Q star level, the consumer surplus is this triangle. The producer surplus is this trapezoid, right? We can see on this graph. And the total external cost to the society is like the how much damage, how much pollution it cost. It's the area of this triangle. It also used the knowledge of the calculus, because in this line segment, each point has damage, has marginal damage, and we all add them up. The final outcome is the area of this triangle. Okay, and the total surplus, in the former slides, we said that the total surplus is equal to consumer surplus and producer surplus, but that is the situation when there is no externality. But here we need to consider the externality, so we need to minus the total external cost to the society. We need to minus the damage. Okay, so the outcome is this one plus this one minus this one. So it is this triangle plus this trapezoid minus this triangle. So it is this trapezoid minus this triangle. Okay, and how to change this triangle into this part? We can find that this triangle is equal to this triangle. Why? Because they have the same base, they have the same height, so they have the same area. Because how much the MSC rises depends on the distance between the marginal damage and the x-axis. So this one equals to this one equals to this one. Okay, so the outcome is that this trapezoid minus this triangle. So the final outcome is this one. Okay, the TS star is equal to this triangle. And let's calculate at Q1 level, the consumer surplus at Q1 level. We don't need to consider the right-hand side of Q1, okay? So the Q1 level consumer surplus is this triangle, producer surplus is this triangle, total external cost to the society is this triangle, right? So we need to use this plus this and minus this. So it is this big triangle minus this triangle. And we also can change this triangle into this part. This triangle is equal to this triangle, right? They have the same base, they have the same height, right? So they have the same area. So the outcome is this big triangle minus this triangle. So the final outcome is this big triangle minus this triangle. It is the TS1 outcome. So after knowing the TS star and TS1, we can calculate the difference between the total surplus at Q star at Q level. It means we use the total surplus TS star and minus TS1, right? So the final outcome, we eliminate these two. Final outcome is this triangle. This triangle is what we said the Dawei loss of the negative production externality.